No supplies. No retreat. The desert had become a cage. The French army, victorious on land, was now trapped between the Sahara and the Royal Navy. They were conquerors, turned castaways. Back in London, church bells rang for days. Nelson was a hero. Napoleon, for the first time in his meteoric rise, had been outplayed. But he didn't panic. "We're here now," he said to his officers. "So we will stay. We will govern." He would rule Egypt like a pharaoh, at least for a while. But the myth of Napoleon, the untouchable genius, was beginning to crack. And deep in the sands, rebellion was stirring. The next chapter would not be fought on the sea, but in the alleys and mosques of Cairo. Early 1799. The map lay on a rickety wooden table inside Napoleon's tent, its edges curled from the desert heat. His finger traced a route northward, past El Arish, Gaza, Jaffa, and finally Acre. A city surrounded by stone walls, hugged by the Mediterranean. That would be the key. He didn't look up when he spoke. "We strike before they do. We bring war to Syria. And we show the Ottomans. France does not wait for death." His officers stared at the map. The road to Acre cut through hell itself. Still, they obeyed. The army marched. Nearly 13,000 men, dragging behind them broken cannons, withered horses, wagons of plague-sick men, and a trail of bones that marked the path. Every footstep was a choice. The Sinai desert offered nothing. No shade. No mercy. Water was scarce and warm. Bread crumbled into powder. Soldiers licked dew off canvas in the morning. At night, vultures circled. By day, the horizon shimmered, cities that turned out to be mirages, palm trees that melted into heat waves. They passed Gaza, once the land of Samson, now a ghostly fortress. Then onward to Jaffa. There, Napoleon paused. Jaffa was not just a city. It was symbolic, a port, a link in the Ottoman supply chain, a moral test disguised as brick and mortar. The French encircled it. For 2 days, they shelled the walls. Cannons thundered across the sea breeze. A breach was made. Then, the storming began. French infantry flooded in, bayonets flashing, orders shouted in smoke and dust. The Ottoman defenders fought with desperate resolve. Muskets fired from rooftops. Boiling oil was poured from towers. But by the 3rd day, Jaffa fell. The city burned. Looters ran wild. French soldiers kicked down doors, tore through bazaars. Women screamed. The air reeked of blood, salt, and gunpowder. Inside a garrison compound, over 3,000 Ottoman soldiers were captured. Many had surrendered under terms of protection. They expected imprisonment. Instead, they got silence. Napoleon walked among them, hands clasped behind his back. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust as he turned to his aide-de-camp. "Berthier, we cannot feed them. We cannot spare men to guard them." Berthier hesitated. "General, they surrendered." Napoleon looked at him, unreadable. "If I let them live, they may fight us again in Acre. This is not cruelty. It is arithmetic." The next day, the prisoners were led in groups of 50 beyond the city walls. They were told to sit. Then the muskets rang out. Over 2 full days, the executions continued. Some French soldiers refused the order. Others followed it in silence, their faces pale. One junior officer wrote in his journal, "We left Jaffa with blood on our boots and ghosts on our backs." But Napoleon didn't stop. He entered the city's hospital next, to face something worse. Plague. Black sores. Bloated limbs. Men delirious with fever. Flies buzzed like demons over open wounds. Napoleon stood among them, unflinching. A doctor warned him not to touch them. He looked down at a dying man. His eyes were wide. His body trembled. Napoleon reached out, and placed his bare hand on the lesion. To some, it was insanity. To others, heroism. To Napoleon, it was a gamble. "They must see I do not fear death," he whispered. A French painter would later immortalize the scene, Napoleon as Christ-like, healing by touch. But reality was messier. The plague spread. Dozens more died on the march north. Horses collapsed, and weren't replaced. Ammunition grew scarce. And yet Napoleon pressed on. He refused to show weakness. Acre was just beyond the hills. If he could take it, this nightmare would have a purpose. If he failed well, he didn't believe in failure. Not yet. The army marched again. Through dust. Through heat. Through memory. And behind them, Jaffa smoldered. March 1799. The gates of Acre. Napoleon stood at the crest of a hill, boots planted in the dry earth, telescope pressed to one eye. Below him, his army dug in, tents scattered across the fields, men laboring over cannons, the walls of Acre looming in the distance. The fortress had stood for centuries, guarding the eastern Mediterranean like a silent sentinel. Napoleon believed he would take it in days. He would be proven wrong, again and again. "There," he said to Berthier, pointing with the telescope. "We breached there. That's the softest wall." Berthier didn't respond. He had begun to lose faith, just like the men in the trenches. The French army was rotting from the inside. They had marched across deserts, bled at Jaffa, buried comrades without names. And now they faced a city that refused to break, defended by stone, disease, and a traitor's brilliance. Inside the city was Djezzar Pasha, called the Butcher. Old, scarred, blind in one eye, and feared even by his own men. His fortress held cannons manned by Janissaries, Albanian mercenaries, and a French defector, Antoine de Philippos, Napoleon's former classmate, now his mortal rival. Philippos knew Napoleon. He knew how he thought. How he attacked. And at every turn, he was one step ahead. Excerpt from a French soldier's journal: "We breach one wall by morning, by night it's rebuilt. They fight like demons. We sleep on blood-soaked blankets and cough in our soup. Some no longer speak. Some walk into enemy fire on purpose." Napoleon's artillery was underpowered. The big siege guns, captured at sea by the British. What remained were field cannons, better suited for scaring horses than smashing stone. Still, he ordered the assault. 10 separate times. 10 waves of French troops charged the walls, storming up ladders, hauling explosives, braving musket fire and flaming pitch. Each time, they were driven back with horrifying loss. One night, during the 7th assault, a French lieutenant, barely 19, stood at the base of the wall with a grenade in each hand. "Shall I live as a coward or die in history?" He screamed the words, ran up the breach, and disappeared in flame. His body was never recovered. Djezzar's defenders dragged French wounded over the walls with grappling hooks, then threw them back lifeless. Psychological warfare. Dialogue, inside Napoleon's command tent. "General Lons, we're out of time. The men are broken, General. Half are dead or dying. The other half haven't blinked in days." Napoleon, coldly, "And what shall I tell France? That we gave up at the door?" Berthier, "Better than returning with corpses, sir." Napoleon, quietly, "Acre was supposed to be the key. We cannot return with nothing." Meanwhile, plague festered in the trenches. The hospital tent stank of pus, blood, and despair. Surgeons worked without pause, amputating with rusted blades, cauterizing wounds with torches. Rats ran freely over the dead. Every day, dozens more collapsed. Fever. Vomiting. Blackened skin. There was no cure. Some soldiers tried to desert. They were caught and hanged near the trenches, their boots left on as a warning. The Ottoman defenders, bolstered by British ships, were not only surviving, they were growing stronger. Admiral Sidney Smith, flamboyant and theatrical, mocked Napoleon from the deck of his ship. "Acre will never fall to a Corsican dreamer," he is said to have written. Each failed assault grew more desperate. And then came the final push. April 30th, 1799. Before dawn, French drums beat through the fog. Cannon smoke masked the rising sun. Napoleon stood at the front lines in full uniform, defiant, but hollow-eyed. "This is the blow that breaks the door," he muttered. It wasn't. The French advanced with bayonets fixed, artillery hammering the outer gate. Some climbed the breach. Some made it over the walls. But they were cut down in seconds. Muskets. Firebombs. Sabers. One soldier, pinned by a spear, screamed, "Tell my mother I died in Jerusalem." But this wasn't Jerusalem. This was Acre, and Acre would not be moved. By noon, the French ranks broke. And for the first time in the campaign, Napoleon gave the order to retreat. He burned what he could, supplies, tents, powder stores. And in the plague tents, the wounded were given laudanum, or suffocated quietly with rags. It was mercy, or so the surgeons said. Napoleon to his inner circle. "We go back to Cairo. We bury this in the sand. Speak of it, to no one." And just like that, the dream of an Eastern Empire, of India, of prophecy, of glory, vanished in the smoke rising over Acre's walls. He had won every battle. Until now. The city had defeated him, not with a sword, but with stone, faith, and time. And as he left the shattered coastline, even the wind seemed to whisper, "You are not Alexander." August 1799. The wind over Cairo had changed. The markets bustled, the call to prayer echoed from the minarets, but in the French headquarters, the silence was heavy. Napoleon stood at the window of a crumbling palace, staring out over the Nile. Below, his men moved like ghosts, many sick, limping, broken. The plague still claimed lives daily. Supplies were dwindling. Morale was bone-thin. He knew the truth, the campaign was dead. And soon, so would be his legend, unless he acted. Then, news arrived. France was collapsing again. The government, what remained of it, was failing. Rivals whispered his name in Paris. The Republic needed a savior. "The time is now," he told his aides. "Egypt is done. But I am not." And just like that, he decided. He would leave. Secretly. Dialogue, inside Napoleon's private chamber. "Berthier, you're abandoning the army?" "Napoleon, I'm saving France. If I fall here, the Republic falls with me." Lawns, what about the men? "Napoleon, they are in good hands. And I have an empire to win." In the middle of the night, under heavy guard, Napoleon boarded a frigate bound for Europe. Only a few officers went with him. The soldiers? They were left behind alone in a land that never welcomed them. Some cried betrayal, some didn't even notice. One captain wrote, "He left in silence, just as the desert taught us, with no ceremony, no apology. Only the wind remained." The journey back was perilous. British ships roamed the seas, but Napoleon evaded them all. Destiny seemed to part the waters for him. He arrived in France to a nation on its knees. And what did he do? He spun a defeat into a masterpiece. The campaign, he claimed, had been a triumph of enlightenment. He spoke not of Acre or the plague, but of science, progress, glory. He showed off the Rosetta Stone. He praised the courage of French soldiers. He never mentioned Jaffa. And the people believed him. They saw not the man who fled a failed campaign but the man who had dared to dream beyond Europe. Within weeks, Napoleon led a coup against the Directory. Within months, he became first consul. Within 5 years, he would crown himself emperor. Legacy of the Egypt and Syria campaign: it had been a military disaster. But it birthed something else. The Rosetta Stone, discovered by French engineers, unlocked the secrets of ancient Egypt. Napoleon scholars cataloged thousands of sites, plants, species, creating modern Egyptology. His armies brought revolutionary ideas, printing presses, and Western law to an ancient land. And his myth endured. Even failure, when narrated by a master, can be weaponized. Napoleon lost Egypt. But he kept the story. And sometimes, that's all history remembers.